The Indianapolis Colts have become an impossible team to try and predict. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. What's up, everybody? I am Jake Arthur from HorseshoeHuddle.com. And today we are talking about these frustrating Colts. I mean, what is this team? Do we know who they are? 2 games left now. They're still very much in the playoff race. They had a really rough loss over the weekend, but it honestly didn't really affect them as much. Last week, we said you don't want them to lose any more games, but if they were going to lose one of those final few games, that one to the Falcons was about all they could afford, which remains true, especially after their loss. So I will just kind of look at the final 2 games as a whole, and then look offensively and defensively just what is going on with this team. So first up, again, do we know who this team is? Their last several weeks have been really brought some highs and lows. At first, they were riding a 4-game win streak, went into Cincinnati with an opportunity to not claim a playoff spot, but a win in Cincinnati really would have gone a long way towards strengthening their bid for one of those, at least a wild card spot, especially when you consider what the rest of the AFC has been doing lately. But they ride that 4-game win streak and then just hit a wall, losing 34-14 against Cincinnati, one of the worst losses of the season. Certainly the first time in several weeks that we could say the Colts just had a complete no-show. They rebound and get a 30-13 win over a pretty decent Pittsburgh Steelers team, at least putting up 30 points against a defense that was pretty solid. And then on Sunday, they go into Atlanta and lose very similarly to how they did against the Bengals, 29-10 loss with just not much to write home about, just making really, really uncharacteristic mistakes. Things that will pretty much doom you anytime, losing the turnover battle, not getting pressure on the quarterback, and not being able to tackle whatsoever. So all those things, we just don't know what this team is right now. The Colts were kind of thrown a life raft with this loss because other teams that have been competing with one of these for these final playoff spots with them all lost. Jacksonville, Houston, and Denver, they all lost. That especially not only keeps the Colts alive for a wild card spot, but with Jacksonville and Houston also losing, Colts still very much alive for the AFC South division title as well. So week 18 at home against the Texans could very well be a game for the division. Let's say Jacksonville loses and the Colts keep winning, and then that sets up this final showdown for the division. But yeah, you're looking at, you got this weekend at home against the Las Vegas Raiders at 7-8. And then the Houston Texans are 8-7. Again, the AFC, no one really wants these playoff spots. It seems like there is the exception. 2 teams have already punched their postseason ticket. Baltimore is 12-3, had one of the premier wins of the season over the 49ers over the weekend. And then the Miami Dolphins at 11-4. Those 2 AFC teams have clinched playoff spots. You've got the Chiefs at 9-6, the Jaguars at 8-7, the Browns at 10-5. The Bills at 9-6, and then the Colts at 8-7, rounding out what would be the rest of the playoff field if the playoff started today. Colts holding on to that 7th and final spot. The Jaguars, with the tiebreaker over the Colts, do technically hold the lead in the AFC South right now. But then that's not the Colts' only competition. There are still a few teams in the hunt as well. Houston, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, and Denver are all within a game of the Colts at 8-7 or 7-8. So of course the Colts face 2 of those teams in the final. Their 2 opponents are in that mix. So they cannot lose. They lose any more games and it's pretty much done for. They would need quite a bit of help and a lot of luck on their side. But when you control your own future, you just have to do that, which is so frustrating about that Atlanta loss, because, again, you look at Houston and Jacksonville both losing as well over the weekend. The Colts lost a very winnable game. They could have sole possession of the AFC South right now. So that's very, very frustrating. There have been some injuries that have kind of dictated this thing. Michael Pittman Jr., who has been far and away the Colts' leading receiver and dominant target all year, he was out with a concussion against the Falcons, and you really, really saw his worth because that's the guy who he never gets like a ton of separation, but he's a very physical, sure-handed receiver. He can move the sticks. He could do things after the catch. He can win those tough one-on-one matchups, and Alec Pierce having to step into that top outside wide receiver role over the weekend and getting AJ Terrell for much of the matchup. That's just not something Pierce is ready to showcase quite yet. So Pittman not being out there was really damaging to the Colts offense. As you saw, only 10 points scored in the game. Braden Smith as well, the right tackle. He's been banged up what seems like all season. Blake Freeland I think he's up to double digits. He's had 9 or 10 starts now this season on either side of the line. And he's done some nice things in the ground game, but it's just been kind of tough sledding for him as a rookie with some of these really tough matchups he's had on the right side of the line. You don't expect the guy to be a finished product right now, but you kind of wonder if Smith continues to be out, if the Colts make a change. You know, they brought in Jared Valdir recently, someone they called out of retirement and who had played games for them just a couple years ago. So it'll be interesting to see if the Colts make a switch there at right tackle if Smith remains out. But really, with those two guys, the lack of adequate protection or production on the outside from the passing game without Pittman, you saw a lot of Josh Downs, you saw a lot of the tight ends. That's about all that can be done, to try and move the sticks, and it just didn't cut it. And then again, Blake Freeland, when you look at his numbers this season, out of all rookie offensive linemen, he ranks 22nd out of 24 qualifying rookies in pass block efficiency, according to Pro Football Focus. So that has not been great. You got to hope, we don't really know what's going on with Braden Smith or how long to expect him to be out. You hope Michael Pittman can come back this week, if that's what's in his best interest, of course. He had kind of a setback with his concussion last week. It looked like he was going to be ready to go, but then when he got to Atlanta after traveling there with the team, just kind of got put back in the concussion protocol after having some symptoms again. But if those guys can come back, that'll definitely be a big boost. It'll even help the run game, particularly with Smith, of course, but with Pittman, it makes the passing game a little more honest. And defenses have already not really respected the Colts passing game throughout the season, but if you take Pittman away, and it's a totally moot point. So coming up, we'll look a little more at the offense and what to maybe expect from the Raiders and Texans defenses coming up in these last couple games. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. Whatever you want to go see, they pretty much have got it going on. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you could stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped about the fun that you're actually going to have. I personally love Gametime because, I'm married, I got a kid. If you feel like doing something on a whim, sending your kid off to grandma's for the night or anything, you don't really have to plan weeks in advance. You can hop on there and see what's going on around your city that weekend and get the best prices for it. Lots of really good features. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You can get images of your seat before you actually buy it, so you know what to expect. Whether that's, a huge beam in your way or whatever, don't buy tickets that are going to kind of downgrade your experience. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds as well. 2 taps and you're all set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email, especially in a long, crowded line with 100 people behind you. That can really induce the cold sweats there. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And if you haven't heard, Locked On has launched the very first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. If you haven't already checked it out, you got to do it. You know, we've all, as sports fans, gravitated to ESPN and things like that over the years because they've always got something for you. Honestly, with how things are moving, with enjoying broadcasting on your phone and YouTube and everything now, we've got something really, really cool going on here. It brings you 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows that cover every league. So go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so let's talk about this Colts offense and what to expect over these last couple weeks. The thing about that is you kind of don't know what to expect with this team because they've had some advantageous matchups recently and just haven't taken advantage of them. And not only have they not taken advantage of them, but the game has been a complete disaster. Atlanta was a tough defense. I'll give you that. Cincinnati was somewhat comparable, but ranked lower in pretty much everything. And the Colts offense was just totally flat and lifeless. One of the touchdowns the Colts scored was on defense. So you take that away, and the Colts offense was even more putrid. So you kind of just don't know what to expect from this group. You've really got to hope Michael Pittman Jr. will be back, of course, again. Against Atlanta, the Colts had 3 drops in the passing game. And if you're going to be missing your far and away your top target, you just have to do your job. You don't have to do anything spectacular. Like, they're not expecting anyone to go out there and be like prime Odell Beckham Jr., but you have to just convert first downs, keep things moving, extend drives, do whatever. But when you're dropping the ball and the passing game has very little vertical element to it, you're not getting separation and things like that, it's just not going to win. But yeah, something like drops has been something that's been a problem in recent weeks when you look at some of their losses. Again, 3 against Atlanta, 3 against Cincinnati as well. Las Vegas and Houston, they're both overall mid-tier defenses. Las Vegas ranks 16th and Houston is 19th, but Las Vegas is top 10 in scoring defense. They're 8th. They allow 19.6 points per game. Now, that's a team that they're just like the Colts, kind of. You don't know what to expect. The Colts are just a better version. They went from losing 3-0 one week to scoring a franchise record 63 the next week. Really, again, that's an interesting team that we'll get further into it, but we'll keep talking about their defense because that's been a unit, the Raiders defense, for the last several years that's been much maligned. But you look at it and they're a lot tougher under Antonio Pierce rather than Josh McDaniels. Both of these teams, 40 and 39 sacks respectively, the Raiders and Texans. That again ranks in the middle of the league. But to me, if a team gets to 40 sacks in the season, they're pretty solid. You want to get to 40 sacks each year. You obviously, the top tier teams are in the 50s and such, but 40 sacks shows that you're capable of bringing down quarterbacks multiple times in a game. One thing for the Colts that get kind of a break here, they have faced some teams recently that were really good in red zone scoring. However, both the Raiders and Texans are in the bottom half of the league in red zone defense. So that's something where you have to rely on Matt Gay field goals. Maybe now that turns into Jonathan Taylor can push you forward for a few extra yards for a touchdown. Maybe you get those Mo Alley Cox touchdowns off play action. You can maybe find more ways, maybe more things there on film to get into the end zone rather than having to rely on 3 points, which the Colts have played some really close games. When you're looking at scores of inside 3 points or so, that's always going to make the difference. So things I might lean on, if Pittman returns, I would absolutely feed him. I would keep getting Josh Downs involved as well. He was obviously a little more heavily involved with Pittman out, but I would not stop that. He's one guy that is able to win those one-on-one matchups in key crucial situations. You got 3rd and short and you want to pass it even out of shotgun. Josh Downs is one of those money makers that you can rely on. The tight ends over the middle of the field, that's going really well, I think, as well. Will Mallory has become a legit little weapon there. Not gaudy stats by any means, but when you look at rookie tight ends, That's a position that just does not translate quickly to the NFL. And Mallory has looked really, really solid. Reliable hands. I can't really think of any blatant drops that he's had this year. He's making tough catches, getting a little bit of extra yardage. He's converting first downs. The majority of his receptions have gone for first downs this year. So I would keep going. I'd rely on that. Kylan Granson had a great, great game. Mo Alley-Cox he's never going to be that dominant pass catching tight end that people once thought he could be. But he's proven capable to make small plays here or there, whether it's, short yardage touchdowns, even in the red zone. You put the Colts anywhere in the red zone, and even the deep red zone, 25, 30-yard line. And Mo Alley-Cox seems to find a way to win those little matchups. So I would keep relying on the tight ends. Drew Ogletree has been pretty quiet the last couple weeks, but he had a stretch this season where he was pretty good as well. So middle of the field, especially with those tight ends, if you want to get them on those, outward post routes, that seems to work as well, especially Mo Alley-Cox. But yeah, with how unpredictable and poor the offense has looked at times, feed Pittman if he returns, and get those tight ends involved over the middle of the field as well. So coming up, we're going to talk about the Colts defense. Such a inconsistent group. You do not know what to expect one way or another. A lot of people have leaned against the coaching, especially in this last week. The execution has to turn into it as well. Testing my skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, then you could turn a meager $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple to play. Like I said, I can make my picks and submit my entry just a couple taps, less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of player and stat types. That's really what makes PrizePicks the number one daily fantasy sports app, especially for people who are just getting into betting, really don't know what to do. It's so user-friendly on that app, and it's really easy for anyone to find something to get really interested in. Something I like, we're right in the meat of the basketball season. It's always a beautiful time of year when basketball and football are on at the same time, of course. There's a specials league on PrizePicks where you can basically throw basketball and football player props together. Just think of a combined, like LeBron James and Travis Kelce. They combine for 11.5 receptions and 3-pointers made, for example. That's something you could bet on higher or, more or less than. And that's a really cool way to make some money as well. And it kind of keeps the brain biscuits turning as a sports fan to be able to see and pay attention to multiple sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Okay, so I've seen a lot of stuff about Gus Bradley since this Atlanta game in particular, and you look at the Cincinnati game as well. He caught a lot of heat. This guy runs pretty hot and cold as well. Rightfully so, when your side of the ball doesn't do well as a coordinator, you should get criticized for it. And I'm not saying he should be free of criticism, but when I went back and rewatched that Atlanta game, what really stuck out to me when you're letting a team quarterback like someone like Taylor Heineke win like that, I look at all the missed tackles, because that game was all about the run game being allowed to extend plays longer than they should have, and the screen game, especially to running backs, being way more productive than it needed to be. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, kind of went wild on the Colts as a tandem. I went to PFF because I lost track of missed tackles in this whole game, which to me was the story of the defense. It wasn't necessarily the play calling or whatever. It came down to execution, because I felt like it extended drives. It gave Atlanta touchdowns. The missed tackles to me is what really did the Colts defense in. PFF docked them with 23 missed tackles, and that seemed pretty validating to my eyes. And you were getting it from some of the Colts' best players. I saw Zaire Franklin miss some tackles, EJ Speed miss some tackles, Kenny Moore. That's 3 of your most sure tackling players. And it really hurts when someone like a Julian Blackmon goes out with his shoulder injury, because he is usually a very sure tackler as well. Now he's out. He's replaced with Nick Cross, who has been pretty solid in that department as well. But, Rodney Thomas, that has not been his bread and butter this year. So really tough. You're not going to be able to win games or sustain any sort of winning streak when you're not able to bring down teams that don't have an explosive element necessarily, and then you're letting them just control everything with the short game. Because a lot of these teams that don't have vertical offenses like the Colts try and use the screen game as an extension of the run game to be even more diverse in the run game. And I mean, I mentioned the Colts let down against the Bengals was arguably their worst game. They only had 8 missed tackles in that game, according to PFF, versus 23 in this one. So that just goes to show you, like, how we know the Colts offense isn't super productive, at least not consistently. So the defense kind of has to be on it a lot. Missed tackles is tackling is like the number one fundamental of defense. So that's no doubt something they're going to be harping on and just pounding into these guys' heads. And again, yes, we could criticize Gus Bradley for plenty, whether it's not, when you don't have a pass rush, you need to try to find a way to generate that when you're not coming home with 4 guys. But I mean, lack of execution and missing tackles and not being in the right places in coverage, and your spacing is odd. That stuff is that's just not gonna allow you to succeed. I just don't know how else to say it. So I mean, Gus Bradley does deserve some criticism, but it is not all on him. Like, he can't be out there playing for the players, which is part of the accountability factor, which, to people's credit, is another thing that people have been harping on with Gus Bradley needing to be accountable, whether it's up to Shane Steichen or, the players that are actually on the field. So that one's really tough. Another thing I've really noticed, lack of pressure. That Cincinnati game, that was really glaring because the Colts were on a heater with their pass rush leading up to that, but then they had 0 sacks and only 3 quarterback hits in that Bengals game. Worse, really, in this Atlanta game. They only had 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit on Heineke. Now, Heineke is pretty mobile. He's not like a Lamar Jackson type, obviously, but the guy moves around a lot. He can buy time with his feet. He gets out of the pocket. He gets rid of the ball pretty quickly because a lot of the passes are short, and he is always looking to get out of the pocket. He's not the biggest guy, so, where he can get out to see better, it's what he's going to do. And I think that kind of led to the lack of pass rush for the Colts. Kwity Paye, the only guy accounting for a sack in this one. So we've seen huge examples in recent weeks of the Colts losing mightily because they're missing tackles and they're not getting to the quarterback. So luckily, I'm not even going to say a break, because we know that they have not really been taking advantage of those lately, but there's really no reason for them not to control things this Sunday against the Raiders. A Raiders team on offense last week who went the final 3 quarters of the game without completing a pass. The Raiders became the first team in NFL history to do that, win a game while not completing a pass the final 3 quarters of the game. That is pretty wild. They've had 11 games this year scoring 2 or fewer touchdowns as well. They do have that 63-point game a couple weeks ago, but the defense was scoring touchdowns, special teams was scoring. So offensively, this is not a good offense. The Colts defense, if they have any gumption or reason to make the postseason, will step up. And I'm not saying they have to win, but the defense has to prove that it's not just going to roll over. I don't really care what the Raiders throw at them. Their body of work is what they've shown all season, and Gus Bradley and everyone out there has the tape to see it. They have a not very productive rookie quarterback in Aiden O'Connell, who's been fine, but is very much a game manager and has been unspectacular. They cannot let yet another backup quarterback beat them. Like, it's one thing if it's a team effort and you lose, but the Colts defense cannot keep just no-showing. And you can already expect what the Raiders offense is going to try to do. They're going to try to get the ball out quickly. And they're going to try the screen game, because they know that if they're one of those quick passing offenses, the Colts are not going to be able to get to them and put pressure on O'Connell. You could see it coming a mile away. That is what the Raiders offense should at least try to do. So you have all week to figure out how to counter that. And I think everyone would be very, very rightfully upset if the Colts lay another egg against the Raiders, because coming up after that is the Texans, who is a lot more respectable. I think a lot more people think are a more legitimate contender because of CJ Stroud, who should be back. There's already being positive reports that he's going to be returning to practice this week. So even if he doesn't play this week, you would think he should return against the Colts, hopefully for them. That's, again, Houston and Las Vegas. It's two teams you should be able to beat. The Colts already beat Houston back in week 2. Before Anthony Richardson went out for the game with his concussion, it looked like the Colts were going to rout the Texans. Both of those teams don't really run the ball well. They're both bottom 10 run offenses. And, in terms of protection, still speaking about the line, Houston, the Colts sacked CJ Stroud 6 times back in week 2. So that's obviously a team that struggles to protect their passer, struggles to open up run game. It has trap written all over it, because that's been a very, very similar recipe to some other teams that the Colts have laid eggs against. So, guys, we just gotta hang on tight. If you're a team that, or if you're a fan that is really, really hoping for the playoffs, this is going to be a nail biter for the final 2 weeks. If you're just along for the ride and you know that from the beginning when Anthony Richardson was knocked out for the season, that the season didn't matter. I know a lot of people feel that way. Still, we got 2 games to watch. It's 2 very winnable games for the Colts that they should win. But this team has become so unpredictable, and it's become must-watch TV for Colts fans, because you no longer have this, okay, Colts are going to face the Raiders. I can go get on my home, my to-do list done all day because they're going to win. We don't know that anymore. You now have to fully monitor them to see what's going on. So that's what we got for you the rest of this week as well. Zach is going to be talking with fellas over at Locked On Raiders to get more bigger scoop on that game, get more specifics. After this, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. You'll be routed over to that after this video here, again, which is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. If you guys don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also, be sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We would love your ratings and reviews as well. And with that, we will see you fine folks tomorrow morning.